The first time they called Clara Bell a curse, she was 17 years old. It happened on a
She's the
Sunday morning
curse.
in the little frontier town of Mercy Creek, where church bells rang from a wooden steeple, and everybody knew everybody else's business before breakfast. Clara had been standing outside the general store with a basket of eggs when old Mrs. Pritchard crossed the street, pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, and whispered loudly enough for half the town to hear. "That's the girl." Clara looked up. Mrs. Pritchard made the sign of the cross. "The Bell girl," she continued, "trouble follows her family." A few people turned. Clara lowered her eyes and held the basket tighter. She had heard it before. Her mother had died during a fever outbreak. Her father had been killed when his horse threw him against a fence post. Her older brother Daniel had disappeared after joining a cattle drive and had never returned. 3 deaths in 6 years. 3 losses were enough for people to invent a reason. And Clara had become that reason. Some said her mother had cursed the family before she died. Others said Clara had been born under a bad moon. A traveling preacher had once suggested that the Bells carried dark fortune in their blood. Clara never understood what dark fortune was supposed to look like. To her, it looked like an empty chair at supper. It looked like a pair of her father's boots sitting untouched beside the door. It looked like a bed that had belonged to her brother. But Mercy Creek saw something else. They saw a girl who survived. And sometimes, people are frightened by those who survive what should have destroyed them. Clara picked up the basket. She started walking home. Behind her, Mrs. Pritchard whispered again. "Don't get too close." Clara heard it. She always heard it. She simply pretended she didn't. 7 years later, Clara was 24, and the rumors had grown with her. She lived alone in a small white farmhouse beyond the eastern creek. The house had belonged to her father. The roof leaked in 2 places. The porch leaned slightly to one side. The kitchen stove smoked whenever the wind came from the north. But it was hers. Clara had learned to repair fences, milk cows, grow vegetables, mend boots, and shoot well enough to discourage thieves. She had also learned not to expect kindness from strangers. One summer afternoon, she was riding home with a sack of flour tied behind her saddle when she saw a crowd gathered beside the creek. A horse was down. A man was kneeling beside it. Clara recognized the horse immediately. Black as coal. Expensive saddle. Silver bit. It belonged to Nathaniel Hawthorne. Everyone in Mercy Creek knew Nathaniel Hawthorne. He owned the largest ranch in the county. Hawthorne Ranch stretched across thousands of acres, with cattle numbering in the hundreds and enough horses to make most men jealous. Nathaniel was 35, unmarried, wealthy, and known for being difficult to impress. He rarely visited town unless business required it. He spoke little. He paid his workers well. He had a reputation for being fair. But nobody called him gentle. Clara pulled her horse to a stop. "What happened?" One of the ranch hands looked at her. His horse stepped in a hole. Nathaniel was kneeling in the dust, examining the animal's leg. He glanced up. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Clara dismounted. "Move aside." The ranch hand frowned. "What? You're crowding the horse." Nathaniel studied her. "You know horses." "I know enough." She walked closer. The horse tried to rise. "Don't let him," Clara said. Nathaniel immediately placed a hand against the animal's neck. "Oh, is he?" Clara crouched. She ran her fingers carefully along the horse's lower leg. "Broken?" "No," she said. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. "You certain?" "Not yet." She continued examining the leg. Then she found the problem. There, a small piece of jagged metal was lodged beneath the horseshoe. "That's what caused it." Nathaniel removed the piece. The horse slowly relaxed. Clara stood. "He'll be sore for a few days, but I don't think it's broken." Nathaniel looked at her. "You're Clara Bells." It wasn't a question. She nodded. He had heard the stories. Of course he had. Everybody had. Oh, yes. His expression did not change. Thank you. Clara climbed back onto her horse. One of the ranch hands muttered under his breath. Shouldn't have let her touch him. Nathaniel heard it. Clara did too. Nathaniel turned toward the man. Why? The ranch hand suddenly became interested in the ground. Nothing, Mr. Hawthorne. Nathaniel looked back at Clara. She was already riding away. 3 days later, Nathaniel Hawthorne came to Clara's farmhouse. She was splitting firewood when she heard hoofbeats. She turned. Nathaniel sat on a gray gelding. He removed his hat. Miss Bell. Clara rested the axe against the chopping block. Mr. Hawthorne, I came to repay you. You already thanked me. I meant for something else. He held out a small leather pouch. Clara didn't take it. What is it? Money. For what? For the horses. I didn't do it for money. I know. Then I don't want it. Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment. You always this stubborn. Only when people try to pay me for being decent. Something almost resembling a smile touched his face. Fair enough. He put the pouch away. Then he looked toward the barns. You have cattle. 6 cows. 6. And 2 calves. Your father left you this place. Oh yes. Nathaniel nodded. You're managing it alone. Oh yes. He looked around the properties. The fences needed repair. The barn roof needed replacing. There were weeds near the well. But the garden was healthy. The animals were well fed. Everything was clean. You do a good job. Clara shrugged. I have to. Nathaniel was silent. Then he said, I have a position open at my ranch. I don't work for you. I wasn't offering you a job. She looked at him. What were you offering? I need someone who knows horses to help with the breeding stock. Clara laughed softly. You just said I wasn't being offered a job. I changed my mind. She smiled despite herself. Then I declines. Why? Because I don't want people saying I'm working for Hawthorne Ranch. They already say plenty. Exactly. Nathaniel nodded. Then he mounted his horse. Before leaving, he looked back. If you ever need anything, come to me. Clara watched him ride away. She didn't know why those words stayed with her. Autumn came early that year. The grass turned gold. The nights grew cold. And Clara's life became unexpectedly complicated. Nathaniel began appearing at her farm. Sometimes he brought supplies. Sometimes he claimed he was checking a fence line. Once he showed up carrying a sack of apples. These are from our orchard, he said. I don't need apples. I didn't ask. She took the sack. Thank you. He nodded. Then he stayed. They talked. At first about horses. Then cattle. Then weather. Then books. Clara discovered Nathaniel had a surprising love of poetry. Nathaniel discovered Clara could recite entire passages from books she had read as a child. Their conversations grew longer. People noticed. Mercy Creek always noticed. One afternoon, Clara went into town for lamp oil. The moment she entered the general store, the talking stopped. She knew why. Mrs. Pritchard was standing near the counter. So, the old woman said. Clara stopped. So, I hear you've been spending time with Nathaniel Hawthorne. Clara placed her money on the counter. I'm buying lamp oils. Mrs. Pritchard sniffed. Men like Nathaniel don't marry women like you. Clara's face hardened. Good thing I didn't ask him to. She picked up the oil. As she walked toward the door, Mrs. Pritchard called after her. Your family brings death wherever it goes. Clara froze. For one terrible second, she was 17 again. She saw her father's boots, her mother's empty bed, Daniel's old coat. Then she turned around. Perhaps, Clara said quietly, the reason death follows my family is because we keep living long enough to meet it. The store went silent. Clara walked out. She did not cry until she reached home. Winter arrived with a violent storm. Snow buried the roads. The creek froze. Nathaniel's ranch was almost 20 miles from Clara's farm. For 3 days, nobody could travel. On the fourth morning, Clara woke to the sound of horses. She stepped outside. A ranch hand was riding toward her. It was Samuel, Nathaniel's foreman. His face was pale. "Miss Bell, what happened?" "Mr. Hawthorne." Clara's heart dropped. "Is he hurt?" "Badly." "What happened?" "He went looking for 2 missing calves. Horse fell through the ice." Clara didn't hesitate. "Where?" "North pasture." "How long ago?" "Last night." Clara ran inside. She grabbed her coat, rifle, rope, medical kit, and saddle. Samuel stared at her. "What are you doing?" "Saving him." The two rode into the snow. They found Nathaniel near the frozen creek. He was unconscious. His horse lay dead several yards away. Clara dropped to her knees. Nathaniel's leg was trapped beneath a fallen tree branch. "Help me lift it." Samuel looked frightened. "Miss Bell." "Now." Together they freed him. Clara checked his breathing. "Alive?" "Barely." "We have to get him home." The storm had returned. There was no chance of carrying him 20 miles. So Clara made a decision. "We take him to my farm." Samuel stared at her. "That's 5 miles." "Then ride." They built a makeshift sled from a broken fence panel. For hours they dragged Nathaniel through the snow. By the time they reached Clara's house, his lips were blue. She spent the entire night fighting to keep him alive. She boiled water, changed bandages, fed him broths, kept the fire burning. At dawn, Nathaniel opened his eyes. He stared at the ceiling, then turned his head. Clara was asleep in a chair beside the bed. Her hair had fallen loose. Her hands were red from cold water. Nathaniel watched her quietly. When she woke, she found him staring. "You nearly died." He tried to sit up. She pushed him back. "Don't." "What happened?" "You fell through the ice." "I remember." "You have a broken leg." Nathaniel looked at her. "You saved me." Clara looked away. "You needed help. Nobody else came." "You were lucky." Nathaniel smiled faintly. "Was I?" Clara didn't answer. Nathaniel stayed at Clara's farm for nearly 3 weeks. During those weeks, something changed. He saw her life up close. He saw how carefully she cared for every animal. How she repaired everything rather than replacing it. How she woke before sunrise. How she worked until dark. He also saw her loneliness. One evening while Clara was preparing supper, Nathaniel asked, "Why don't you leave?" She looked over. "Leave where?" "Mercy Creek." "Where would I go?" "Anywhere." She smiled sadly. "I've spent my whole life being told I'm a curse. After a while, you stop believing the world has a place for you." Nathaniel was silent. Then he said, "I don't believe it." Clara looked at him. "What?" "That you're a curse." She laughed once. "People have believed it for 20 years. People are often wrong." She looked back at the stove. "You don't know me well enough." "I know enough." "No." She shook her head. "You know how I treated your horse. You know I kept you alive. That's not knowing someone." Nathaniel leaned forward. "Then let me know you." Her hands stopped moving. The room became very quiet. Spring came. Nathaniel returned to Hawthorne Ranch. But he did not forget Clara. He visited often. Sometimes they rode together. Sometimes they sat on her porch after supper. Sometimes they said nothing. The rumors became worse. Then one morning, Nathaniel walked into the Mercy Creek Bank and withdrew a large sum of money. The banker asked what it was for. "Property." "Buying land." "No." "Livestock." "No." The banker smiled knowingly. "You're finally getting married." Nathaniel said nothing. That was answer enough. By evening, the whole town knew. By morning, everyone knew the bride. Clara Bells, the cursed girl. People laughed. Some said Nathaniel had lost his mind. Others said Clara had bewitched him. Mrs. Pritchard declared that Hawthorne Ranch would be ruined within a year. Nathaniel ignored them. Then he went to Clara's house. She was standing beside the garden when he approached. Clara, she looked up. Why is everyone talking about us? Because I asked your permission to marry you. Her face went still. You what? I came to ask you. She stared at him. You know what they say about me. Oh yes. You know my family history. Oh yes. They'll blame me for every bad thing that happens to you. I know. She looked away. You'll regret it. I won't. You can't promise that. Nathaniel stepped closer. I can promise this. She looked at him. I will never call you a curse. Her eyes filled with tears. He reached into his coat. There was no diamond. No extravagant ring. Instead, he held out a simple silver band. My mother wore this, he said. Clara stared at it. She wanted me to give it to the woman I loved. Clara's breath caught. You love me. Nathaniel nodded. I have for some time. She covered her mouth. I don't know what to say. Say no if you don't love me. She looked at him through tears. That's the problem. What? I do. Nathaniel smiled. Then marry me. Clara nodded. Oh yes. They were married 6 weeks later. The ceremony took place beneath an old oak tree on Hawthorne Ranch. Only a few people attended. Samuel, several ranch hands, 2 neighbors, and unexpectedly Mrs. Pritchard. Clara wore a simple cream-colored dress. Nathaniel wore black. When they exchanged vows, the wind moved gently through the trees. For one brief moment, everything felt peaceful. Then a terrible sound came from the cattle pasture. A gunshot. Nathaniel turned. Samuel was already running. A stampede. The cattle had broken through a fence. Hundreds of animals thundered toward the eastern ridge. Nathaniel mounted his horse. Clara followed. Stay here, he shouted. No, Clara. She kicked her horse forward. Together they raced toward the herd. A young ranch hand had fallen. Clara saw him first. She turned her horse and rode directly into the chaos. Nathaniel followed. They pulled the boy free seconds before the cattle reached him. Then Nathaniel saw the broken bridge ahead. Clara. She looked. The herd was heading straight toward it. If they crossed, dozens would fall into the ravine. Clara understood immediately. We have to turn them. How? She looked at the terrain. There's a narrow passage by the old barn. Nathaniel nodded. Can you ride there? Oh yes. They split apart. Clara rode along the herd's left side. Nathaniel took the right. They shouted, whistled, pushed. The cattle shifted. The herd turned. Instead of reaching the bridge, they moved toward the open pasture. The danger passed, but Clara's horse stumbled. She fell. Nathaniel jumped down. Clara. She was unconscious. He dropped beside her. Blood ran from her forehead. He lifted her into his arms. Behind him, the ranch hands gathered. Mrs. Pritchard stood among them. Someone whispered, "The curse." Nathaniel heard it. He stood. His face became cold. Say that again. Nobody spoke. Nathaniel carried Clara toward the house. Clara survived. Her injuries were not as serious as they first appeared. But during the days she recovered, Nathaniel became fiercely protective. Then another disaster struck. A fire began in the main barns. The wind drove flames toward the cattle sheds. Nathaniel and his men fought for hours. The barns burned. 2 storage buildings were destroyed. Nobody died, but much of the ranch's winter feed was gone. By sunset, people in town were already talking. The curse has begun. She'll ruin him. First the stampede, now the fire. Nathaniel heard every word. He ignored them until Mrs. Pritchard confronted him. You married her. Nathaniel looked at the old woman. Oh yes. And now look what has happened. Nathaniel's expression was calm. 300 acres of grass burned. Your barn is gone. Oh yes. Your ranch is ruined. Nathaniel looked toward the smoking ruins. No. Mrs. Pritchard frowned. What? My ranch isn't ruined. He turned toward the men rebuilding the fence. Buildings can be rebuilt. Then he looked toward the house. People cannot. The following spring was unusually dry. Rain barely came. Crops failed across the county. Water became scarce. Many ranchers sold their cattle. Nathaniel refused. Instead, Clara suggested something nobody expected. Dig a well. Nathaniel looked at her. We have a creek. The creek is drying. Where? She pointed toward a low stretch of land behind the northern pasture. Here. Why? Look at the grass. Nathaniel stared. The grass there remained green. He called Samuel. They dug. 10 feet. 20. 30. At 40 feet, the shovel struck wet earth. At 46 feet, water burst upward. The ranch had a new well. It became the only reliable water source for miles. Nathaniel allowed neighboring families to use it. Within months, Hawthorne Ranch became the center of the community. People who had once called Clara a curse now came to her door asking for help. She never refused. One afternoon, Mrs. Pritchard arrived. She stood awkwardly on the porch. Clara opened the doors. Mrs. Pritchard. The old woman looked down. I came to apologize. Clara said nothing. I was wrong about you. Oh yes. Mrs. Pritchard swallowed. I thought your family carried bad luck. Clara leaned against the doorway. What changed your mind? The old woman looked across the ranch. I watched you save Nathaniel. She paused. I watched you help my neighbors when their wells dried up. Another pause. And I realized something. What? Mrs. Pritchard's eyes softened. Perhaps the curse was never you. Clara waited. Perhaps it was the way we treated you. For the first time in years, Clara didn't know what to say. She stepped aside. Would you like some coffee? Mrs. Pritchard smiled. I would. Years passed. The story of Clara Bell changed. Children who had once been warned not to speak to her now rode horses with her. Women came to her for advice. Men respected her judgments. Nathaniel often joked that Clara was the real owner of Hawthorne Ranch. She never denied it. Together they built a new barn. They expanded the herd. They planted an orchard. And beneath the old oak tree where they had married, they built a small wooden bench. Every evening they sat there. One autumn sunset, Clara rested her head against Nathaniel's shoulder. Do you ever think about what they called me? Nathaniel looked at her. A curse. Oh yes. He smiled. Sometimes. What do you think now? Nathaniel took her hand. I think you were the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. She laughed. That's a dangerous thing to say. Why? Because if anything goes wrong tomorrow, they'll blame me. Nathaniel shook his head. Then let them. Clara looked at him. Why? Because after all these years, I know the truth. What truth? He kissed her forehead. You weren't the curse. She smiled. What was? Nathaniel looked across the land. Fear. Clara was quiet. Then she squeezed his hand. The sun disappeared behind the distant hills. For years, Mercy Creek had believed Clara Bell carried death wherever she went. They had mistaken survival for misfortune. They had mistaken loneliness for darkness. They had mistaken a woman who endured tragedy for a woman who caused it. But Clara had never been a curse. She had been a survivor, a healer, a farmer, a wife, and eventually the heart of the largest ranch in the county. Years later, when children asked Nathaniel why he had married the woman everyone once feared, he always gave the same answer. I didn't marry her despite the stories. He would smile. I married her because I discovered the stories were lies. And whenever Clara heard him say it, she would smile too. Because somewhere beneath the old oak tree, where they had promised their lives to one another, she had finally found something she had been denied since childhood. Not fortune, not wealth, not acceptance. Home.